Yes, yes. When we're not practiced, let's say, we we don't see with a lot of detail. So somebody who's a professional musician is going to hear music with a lot of, maybe hearing the same detail, but understanding a lot more. The notes, understanding a lot more of those details. Somebody could not be trained and hear all the details, but not understand as deeply. And so when we experience the thought process, somebody who hasn't had a lot of attention or practice in observing thought won't recognize the details, won't understand the mechanisms. And so at that level, we can feel thought is the problem. There could be already a sense of, if only I could stop thinking, I would be okay. This is a common experience. So it's a general sense that there's something around the thought process that's creating the distress, it's creating the suffering. Well, if when it's communicated, it is a thought, but it is beyond that. It's a kind of understanding, but it's an understanding that's not complete. And so if we think the problem is our life, if we think the problem is something happening in our life, then there's misunderstanding. So if the circumstance, the politics, the work, the relationships, if that is believed to be the cause of our suffering, the deepest cause. So I'm talking about always the deepest. What's the deepest? So if we think it's the circumstance, the relationship, then there's misunderstanding. And there will be a belief there that is a false belief. Now, if we come to a realization that the cause of the suffering has to do with something, let's call it internal, of the thought process, the psyche, then there's an understanding there. We're coming closer to a truth. But it could be partial, so not a complete understanding, because we might think it's thinking alone, just the process of thinking. And so there's partly an understanding and partly not complete understanding. Because thinking is not the problem. But it is because we have this general sense of what happens in the thought process. we are close to a truth. It's a discovery. The problem is not my circumstance. The deepest problem, obviously there are problems in circumstances that need to be addressed. When I'm talking about the deep cause of the absence of well-being, the sense of something's always missing, no matter what. And the cause of that isn't thinking alone. The thought is the belief in what I am. And I know that expressed this way is very, could be heard and understood in different ways. But it has to do with knowing what I am. And the thought process that seems to become a struggle is the way in which we are constantly reinforcing this belief. Yes. It's the identification with, when I say I, when we say I, we're pointing to something. That sense of subjective experiencing, that sense of being. Now, normally, we believe we know what that is. This subjective experiencing is wrapped into a mental understanding, which is, for example, I am a man, I was born, I will die, and that subjective experiencing emerges from this. And so if this body ends, so does I. If I were to say the opposite, if this body ends, I do not end, I will continue in rebirth and I will go to heaven, and that's another belief. Same problem. And so this work, by learning to see the structure of the mind and how it operates, we can start to see, as I was saying in the metaphor of a musician, a master musician understanding, we can listen to the music of the thought process and understand that which seemed to be what I am is just thought. And that puts us in if we see that deeply, something will break. And we will no longer be able to know what I am. And that's a process that could be difficult. But after that transition, there's a freedom. There's a well-being. This is what we've been talking about. And then there could be a phase where there's a back and forth into that identification and out and in and out.